In this short series of videos, we're going to learn how pitch is represented on the musical staff. Ironically, though, we're not actually going to start on that until the second video in this series, because we need to actually define what pitch is for those that don't want to get into the physics of sound and what frequency is and that sort of thing. Which is why we can actually use the piano as a way to visually represent the relationship between pitches, regardless of whether anyone has a background in piano or not. This is useful for all musicians. Now, singers have an inherent advantage in that singers are easily able to distinguish between high and low pitches just by using the human voice. For example, a high pitch here is easily identified as being a higher pitch than a low pitch like this. But if you aren't a singer or aren't aware of the nuances of the voice, it becomes very difficult to visualize the difference between a high pitch and a low pitch, which brings us to the piano. Now, the piano, for those who are unfamiliar with the instrument, is a keyboard-based instrument, because if you were to press any key on the piano, whether it be a white-colored key or a black-colored key, each key on the piano keyboard would cause a different pitch to resonate on the instrument. And if you move to the right side of the piano, you would produce a higher pitch. And the equivalent in the human voice of starting on a low pitch and going to a higher pitch would sound something like this. Except the piano obviously doesn't have the ability to slide the way that the human voice does. Conversely, if we move to the left side of the piano, this would result in a lower pitch being produced, and the equivalent for the human voice would sound something like this. You should be able to hear the difference, nevertheless. Now, each of the keys on the piano is actually given a specific name, and each name of each key on the piano corresponds to a specific pitch that it produces. No two keys on the piano produce the same pitch. And we're going to start with the white keys on the piano because this also allows us to introduce the abbreviated musical alphabet. So if you're familiar with the English alphabet, you already know the names of different pitches. We start on A and simply go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And if you don't remember what letter comes after G, that's good news, because there is no letter that comes after G when it comes to defining musical pitches. And we'll see how this corresponds on the piano. Ironically, though, we're not actually going to start labeling pitches on A, because labeling pitches on C is actually much easier to do. Why? That's just the way that the notation system was derived. Now we're going to take a look at this pitch here, or this key on the piano keyboard here, and we can easily identify this key here because there is a group of two black keys when we look to the right, and if we look to the left, we can see that there is a group of three black keys over here. Whenever you find a white key that is surrounded by two black keys on the right and three black keys on the left, you have just identified C. Now, this particular C is right in the middle of the piano keyboard, so not surprisingly, we would call this middle C. And if you know how the English alphabet works, you can figure out the names of the rest of the white keys. So after C comes D, after D comes E, after E comes F, after F comes G. And because there is no letter H in the musical alphabet, we would restart the musical alphabet at A here, followed by B, and if we were to extend this keyboard upward, the next white key would be C. Conversely, if we were to go to lower pitches, we would simply find the pitch before C, which would be B, before B is A, and because there is no letter that comes before A, we would go to the back of the musical alphabet, G, and start counting down from there until we've identified the rest of the pitches on the white keys of the keyboard. Now, each of these pitches here, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, repeating theoretically infinitely in either direction. These are what we call the natural pitches of the piano keyboard because they correspond to the white keys of the piano. But what about those black keys to which I alluded earlier? Well, it's easiest to pick a single black key and look at the different ways that we can arrive to that black key. For example, if we take a look at this black key here between C and D, we can arrive at this black key in two different ways. Firstly, we can start at D and we can drop down to a lower pitch from D. And in order to name this particular black key, we would use this symbol here, which is what we call a flat sign. So because we went from D downward, we would label this as being D flat, because a flat sign tells us to lower the pitch of the closest white key to that. So D lowered by one key on the piano would get us D flat. Now conversely, we could actually get to the same black key by starting at C and going up instead, in which case we would use this symbol here, which is what we call a sharp sign. So this key can also be called C sharp because we started at C and we raised the pitch of C in order to get to C sharp, meaning that every single black key on the piano actually has two different names. For example, if we were to name the black key in between F and G, we can go up from F, in which case we are raising the pitch of F because we're moving rightward on the piano, so this would be called F sharp. Conversely, we can arrive at this black key by going down from G, so we could alternately name this key here G flat. Now, knowing these symbols, the flat sign and the sharp sign, as well as this sign here, the natural sign, which actually tells us to cancel out the sharp sign or the flat sign and return the pitch to its original unsharpened, unflattened form, this allows us to read the notation system that is eventually going to be used in the staff in order to represent pitch. Before you move on to that video, however, it's recommended that you do a little bit of practice in terms of identifying pitch, identifying the names of white and black keys on the piano, and seeing if you can distinguish whether a specific piano key results in a higher pitch or a lower pitch than another piano key. So before you move on to the next video that looks at how pitch is represented in the staff, try the practice problems below and see if you can identify more than one location on this piano keyboard for each of the pitches given below.